The following is a presentation of iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations on LSRTV, the voice of sim racing.
Good evening, sim racing fans, and welcome to those of you watching on Facebook Live and YouTube. Welcome to LSRTV's coverage of the RealSimRacing.com Full Throttle Cup Series presented by Gary Mercer Trucking, live from Talladega Superspeedway in the heart of Alabama. I am James Pike, joined tonight in the booth by Mr. Brian Macklin and in our virtual production trailer by the ever lovely and talented Cisco Scaramuza. And Macklin, the first question that goes to my head is, do you think we're going to finish this race with more or less cars than the Cup race yesterday finished with? Because that's certainly a possibility when you come here. It's not uncommon to see a lot of things get torn up very quickly.
Well, it depends on the mindset of all the drivers that are in this race. If they looked at yesterday's race and they're like, oh, I can do that, well, then we're going to have less, I would say, because we're starting with less. But if these guys come in here and they race kind of on the smart side and decide to take it easy, I think we could have most of these guys still running at the end of the race. It's going to be a very exciting race. It looks like we have 28 cars in the server right now, so going to be plenty of cars here to make that second groove work. And if we get enough cars lined up, we might even see a third groove start to form, and it should be a very exciting night for everybody.
An exciting night for a lot of people. But for David Washington, a very, very easy evening, because he's already won by virtue of his victory last week at Charlotte, and now is in good shape to make it through to the round of 8. But for everybody else, it gets a little bit nail-biting.
Yeah, it does. If you look down there around that cutoff spot, Brandon Bowie is holding that position right now. He's only got a 3-point gap over Nick Silver. Then you look back to Lionel Kalisto, who's back 10 points. Shane Ewing is back just a handful of points more than that. He's back 15. And then Dwayne Vincent is sitting back 17 points. So for those drivers, they've got to be really careful tonight because, well, they can still point their way into the next round of the playoffs, but a win guarantees them a spot, so they have to decide which way they want to take this thing tonight. James, do they go for the win, or do they play it safe and hope they can get some points to move on?
Well, I think it'll be most important to make sure that you don't make any mistakes out in the draft, and I'll already cop to one myself. Dylan Jones was the man who won the race last week at Charlotte, not David Washington. So Jones is the one that is locked in. Washington still has to find a way to win to lock himself into the round of 8. But I think it's worth kind of going back to, because you look at some of these guys, Dwayne Vincent missed the race last week. Shane Ewing's only 2 points ahead of him. And for these guys, I think you have a big opportunity here, because I think we'll see some drivers in the playoffs run into trouble tonight. And in most cases where it'd be hard to make up 20 points in a single race, this is one track where that definitely can happen if you keep your car clean.
Well, and that's definitely a situation where these guys are going to have to decide how they want to approach this race. I know I've never liked the strategy of laying in the back and waiting for things to come to you. I prefer being more aggressive, getting to the front of the field and trying to stay ahead of it all. Because too many things can happen when you're hanging out in the back. You could have somebody behind you that just doesn't check up for the wreck, or you just might not be able to see it quick enough and then you get caught up in it. I just prefer trying to get ahead of it and stay ahead of it for as long as possible. And if this thing were to stay green, you don't want to be at the back of the field. You want to have yourself positioned in a way where you can be racing in the lead pack when you get down to the end of this thing, which isn't completely out of the question. We don't expect it to happen because we know how Talladega normally goes, but it could end up going green flag for quite a while, and that's when you definitely want to make sure you're in a good spot for later in the race.
So you can have a shot to race at the end of this thing. And in case you didn't get the chance to see our broadcast here from the spring, that race ended when Anthony DeBarro got in front of Andrew Freenars, and then those two made contact. DeBarro went sideways and spinning across the start and finish line, collecting a few others, and Freenars went on to win the race. Do you think he gets that crazy at the end?
It certainly could, and looking at the stat sheet, I just noticed we have two drivers in this field that have an opportunity to do something that nobody has done here at Talladega in the Full Throttle Cup Series, and that would be get a second victory here at the Talladega Superspeedway. We've had 11 different winners in 11 races here, and Andrew Freenars and Doug Roth are two drivers that are in this field that have won here before but have only got one victory tabbed up. They could go for number 2 here tonight.
They could go for 2. Everybody else will be looking for their first victory at Talladega. And now that we've completed qualifying, it's time to set your LSRTV starting grid for the evening, which is led off once again by the number 44, Brandon Bowie, with a time of 51.482 seconds. Sean Bounty starts to his outside in P2. The aforementioned Anthony DeBarro, who came oh so close to winning this race in the spring, will start third. Dwayne Vincent missed the race last week, starts fourth tonight. Dylan Jones has the easiest night of all, doesn't have to worry about what happens here because he's already in the round of 8. He'll start fifth. Sean Castro will roll off tonight from the 6th position. 7th is where you'll find the winner of the opening race of the season, also at a restrictor plate racetrack. Down in Daytona, Trevor Rapolo got it done. 8th is where you'll find A.J. Browning, the number 20 machine, and then it's Corey Wolf and your spring winner and playoff contender Andrew Freenars, who rounds out the top 10.
Ross Cato will start from the 11th position here tonight. Nelson Rivera will start to his outside, starting in that 12th position. Then we have Shane Ewing sitting in the 13th spot. Tanner Tallarico will start 14th. Then we have David Comstock starting 15th. Gabe Wood will start in the 16th position. Then we have Nick Silver in 17th. Chris Hurlow will start 18th. And then Carl Shedd is 19th. And rounding out the top 20, our own Austin Coop starts 20th.
Eric Stanford starts from 21st. 22nd is where Dakota Bowman rolls off from this evening. Lionel Galisto begins tonight from 23rd. Bruce Pearson starts 24th. Doug Roth begins tonight from 25th. David Washington starts 26th. Daniel Everhart 27th. The last man to take time, one car starting on the provisional, Douglas Wyatt. And that rounds out your 28-car field for tonight's race at Talladega Superspeedway, technically located in the town of Lincoln in the state of Alabama. We'll go for 85 laps tonight, and at 2.66 miles a lap, we'll go for just over 225 miles. It's 226.1 to be exact. 33 degrees of banking in the turns, 16.5 degrees on that tri-oval, 3 degrees of banking on the straights. I guess the banking in the tri-oval and the straights kind of matters, but it's the banking in the turns that we see that really makes all the difference here, because that's how you can go so fast.
Absolutely, and a way that you can carry some momentum is by running up the track in the middle of the corner and trying to carry that momentum off the banking. When you come off the corners, you're going to see some of these guys trying to do that as they get lined up on the outside line. If they can get 5 or 6 cars lined up behind them, they can carry that momentum to take them to the lead, and we're going to see lots of side-by-side racing as a result of that, especially, again, since we have 28 cars in this field. It should be a very exciting race here tonight. I cannot wait for this thing to get going.
Speed is fun. Cars running together is fun. I think watching the challenge, you might not necessarily be dealing with the same G-forces and all, but these guys are still running within 2 to 3 feet of each other tops at 190 plus miles an hour all around this racetrack, and the slightest nudge, slightest touch can completely throw your day off. We're glad to have you with us here on your home for sim racing, LSR TV, as we begin the 30th race of 36 in the 2017 Full Throttle Cup Series season. Brandon Bowie will lead them back to the start-finish line to get us going, and he slows them down ever so slightly before taking off as we get the green flag to start tonight's race at Talladega. Bowie gets a solid jump, maybe about 3 or 4 car lengths as they come through the gears. Most people dropping down to the bottom pretty quickly. Sean Boundy is staying up there and he gets dumped by Dwayne Vincent, who immediately goes down low. So Bounty might be in big trouble here. He might slide back a few spots if he can't find a spot in line, because it looks like everybody's beginning to hook up on the bottom. And then as soon as I say that, we can throw all that out the window, because Anthony DeBarro teams up with Dylan Jones, and they go get the first 2 spots here on the racetrack.
Yeah, that was the worst case scenario for Brandon Bowie. Usually at any other track, you would love to have a restart like Bowie had right there, but at Daytona or Talladega, you do not want to get out to the advantage that he had. He had 5 or 6 car lengths when they got to turn 1. The problem is the draft brought everybody back in, and that allowed for Anthony DeBarro and Dylan Jones to team up and go around him, because they were carrying so much momentum. They were able to go around him on the outside line, get clear of him before they got to turn 3, and Anthony DeBarro went on to lead the first lap of the race. And now it seems like everybody's going to be a little bit calm here at the beginning of this race, because all the way through the field it is single file. These guys have just decided to get in line and ride it out, and now it's just a matter of who decides to make that move. And James, when you make that move, you have to hope that you have somebody with you in order for it to work.
If you don't have a running mate to jump to the outside with you, you're probably headed back to somewhere in the neighborhood of 19th, 20th. That's where your first side-by-side battle is on track. You got Eric Stanford and Austin Coop going door-to-door at the moment. So that's the sort of drop-off that you have if you get out of shape in any way, shape, or form. Question is anybody really going to be gutsy enough to try it at this stage?
Well, I'm sure some of the guys at the back of the pack will try to get up there and make something happen. We do have a handful of cars now on the outside line that are trying to start to work their way to the front. It looks like David Comstock is the first car leading that line, and there's a couple other guys that are now trying to jump up in front of him. So these guys at the back of the pack, they're going to get impatient. They're not going to want to ride, and now we see, I thought they were going to go 3 wide for a moment as Comstock got shuffled to the middle, and now they are indeed 3 wide back there around that area of the racetrack. That's around 15th right now. Comstock looking for some help but has nobody there. The 53 machine of Austin Coopers went to his outside, and he's bringing some help along with him. But now we're starting to see that second line form, and if they can get a few more cars, they'll start to work their way to the front and could challenge for the race lead here in the next handful of laps.
3 wide there back towards Coop. You've got him on the outside, and then to his inside is David Comstock. Looks like Nick Silver in that McDonald's number 24 machine dropped back just a little bit. He's at least given the option for Comstock to drop down on the bottom lane. Comstock hasn't taken it yet. Meanwhile, Coop's getting a pretty good push from the 87 of Chris Hurlow to jump past all of them, and he will stay to the outside and stay hooked up with Hurlow and try and make that happen. Thinks about sliding down and then does actually slide down, so he'll go pick up Comstock as a running mate back there in the 16th and 17th positions.
And while all that's going on, Sean Boundy has jumped to the outside line. He's leading the outside line, and they have made their way up to the outside of the 3rd place car on the bottom, and now to the 2nd place car on the bottom, Dylan Jones. As Sean Boundy has a great run. He's got a big push from behind from Sean Casto, and they're beginning to carry some speed here. And now as they come off turn 2, you see Anthony DeBarro slide up. He's going to try to control the lines. He pulled up in front of Boundy to control that draft and take his run away from him. Now when they get back down to turn 3, it looks like DeBarro's going to go back to the bottom, so he's going to try to play the lane game here at the beginning of this thing as he goes to the bottom of the racetrack. Now will he jump back up as they come off turn 4? It looks like he's going to stay on the bottom for the moment. He's going to wait for that number 34 to get another run on him, and then I imagine he'll do the same thing once again.
So DeBarro very clearly of the mindset that the more you can spend time up front, the less you have to worry about getting involved in trouble in the back. There's a lot of dancing between lines here. We saw it yesterday with Ryan Blaney and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. before we got towards the very end of the race. In both cases, those were 2 guys who were more than willing to jump between the inside and the outside to take control of the field and make sure they stayed up at the front of it. Not necessarily the most successful time at the moment for DeBarro, though, because Dylan Jones, who doesn't even need this race win to make it to the round of 8, all of a sudden has come underneath him and brought Brandon Bowie in the 44 with him. We may just have a news race leader when we come to the stripe.
Dylan Jones may not need this win to advance into the round of 8 because he's already got one, but he can take a win away from one of the other playoff contenders by winning this race as well, which keeps some of his competitors from potentially being able to lock themselves into that next round and makes it a little bit easier for him when they get to the round of 8. So he's going to approach this race as it's business as usual, try to get out there, lead laps, and see if he can't win this thing. As far as Anthony DeBarro is concerned, him not being in the playoffs, he really has nothing to lose. He hasn't won yet in the Full Throttle Cup Series yet this year. He was very close to winning back in the spring, and he wants to get it done here tonight, and he's doing everything he can to stay at the front of the field. He had a very scary moment, though, James, about a lap and a half ago. He tried to go up to the outside line to block the second groove, and Sean Boundy had enough of a run on him where he almost shoved him out of the way, and fortunately for DeBarro, he didn't get shoved up into that third groove because he could have went from running up here in the top 5 to being outside of the top 15, possibly the top 20, if he would have gotten shuffled out. So he got very lucky right there, and now he's leading the outside line, trying to carry them back to the front.
It did nearly get hairy there for just a moment, and I did see that. Wasn't quite sure if it was going to lead to anything, but something I think you have to watch out for, not necessarily just in this stage of the race, but I think throughout the race, because you've got so many cases here, and you see it more in especially your A fixed races, where guys will come out and maybe be a little bit more aggressive than they need to early on in the race. I think it's worth remembering, especially if you're on top of the pit box and you're a spotter or you're a crew chief, that we still have a long, long way to go. We still have a solid 75 plus laps left here. And it takes some time to complete this at Talladega. So yes, you can push, yes, you can shove, yes, you can go fight for the bonus point for leading a lap, but I think it all needs to be taken in scope with things. And you just have to remember that sometimes it's smarter to push, and sometimes it's smarter to roll out of the throttle and let everything breathe for a bit.
And I tell you, one thing that I'm noticing at the front is how aggressive the Anthony DeBarro is being right now. And that's fine because he's doing a good job with it, but I can also tell you he's burning some bridges by being this aggressive. One thing you don't want to do at a plate track is irritate the guys that you're racing with, because when it comes down to crunch time, they're not going to want to work with you as much as they will here on lap number 9. If he keeps controlling these lines and moving around the way he's doing, he's going to find it very difficult to have somebody to go with him at the end of this thing to keep himself in a position to go for the victory and to potentially keep himself up front, period, because he's really being a little too aggressive, in my opinion, at this stage of the race, trying to hold everybody back and control these lines. It makes things a little difficult for the guys around them, and they're not going to forget that once this thing starts to wind up.
And I think also of note is that behind DeBarro, you've got teammates all over the place. You've got two of the Prestige Worldwide drivers up on the top side, are Sean's, Boundy, and Casto in that order up there. You've got not technically teammates, but two drivers who know this series as well as anybody. Brandon Bowie and Dwayne Vincent there on the inside. And Shane Ewing is right there next to them, and he's a teammate of Bowie's. So you've got that two-car tandem that could develop, and then you've got drivers from Aegis and Power Deck scattered throughout this field. So you don't really have anybody else to work with by default in that sense if you're Anthony DeBarro. So to some degree you want to block and hang on to the lead, but I think you also have to wonder at what point do you want to try and make some friends to make sure that you get some help towards the end of this thing if you need it.
Oh, and that's certainly a concern of mine if I'm in his shoes, because you don't want to burn those bridges too soon. But I'm looking at the mixed strategy in the Aegis PowerTech group. You've got Trevor Rapolo and Dylan Jones at the front, and for Dylan Jones it makes sense. He's already got the win. He's locked into the round of 8. Why not go up here and be aggressive? And for Trevor Rapolo, just he's choosing to stay up there and go after it. He's in a very precarious spot though, because he's 7th in the grid, in the playoff grid right now, and he's only ahead of 9th by 7 points. So he's got to be very careful not to put himself in a bad spot. And then I look back to a couple of the other playoff contenders that are from the Aegis PowerTech group. David Washington, Daniel Eberhardt, and Andrew Freenarch. They are running 23rd, 25th, and 26th right now. They have hung out at the back. They're about 3 seconds out of the lead, and that's where they want to be right now. They have made the decision to stay back there and try to wait for something to happen and try to get through cleanly. The problem with that is if they don't get that lucky break, for David Washington and Daniel Eberhardt and Andrew Freenarch, they could find themselves losing a ton of points here tonight that could hurt their chances at moving on.
Could. But you've got time. That's the key. So, but I think it is important to note, like you said, the contrast in strategies between DeBarro and most of the PowerTech Aegis coalition that are kind of laying off back behind all this to the tune of about 2.5 seconds. They've sort of gapped themselves from this first bunch, which I think, if we're going to be fair, stretches all the way back to about Dave Comstock, Chris Herlove, Dakota Bowman, that sort of area.
Yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see what happens here. As we've already completed 13 laps in this race, and now we're starting to see them mix it up a little bit at the front as Dwayne Vincent is leading that outside line, and he's got a great run coming to the tri-oval now with a big push from Sean Boundy. Can he get to the lead? It doesn't look like he's going to be able to get there. It looks like Brendan Bowie's going to hold him off for the spot here and be able to hang on for that lap. And he's going to control this race now, as he was able to actually move ahead of Anthony DeBarro just about a lap or so ago and be able to take that race lead away. But how about Dwayne Vincent? We don't get to talk about him as much as we'd like to, and he's up here inside the top 5 racing for the lead. He missed the race last week, so he's got some ground to make up, but he's doing a good job right here tonight. If he can stay where he's at, he's going to make a lot of ground up here tonight.
Not a surprise to see him here. Maybe not necessarily the fastest driver throughout the season, but we've said it time and time again on these broadcasts over the course of 2017 that Dwayne Vincent has more experience than just about anybody else in this field. And when he needs to find a way to get it done, usually he does. Last year, that came in the form of his victory at Texas, which got him into the championship four at Homestead, and he's already managed to point his way through the playoffs once. Knows he'll need a good run tonight. So I figure he might try and turn Talladega into a good points day more than anything. And I think he'd probably be about the only one to really go for that. But he'll be there. I think he should be a threat. I think you just have to hope that he and a lot of these other guys don't get caught up in an early wreck that would really shake the field up and change everybody's chances for victory.
And that's the waiting game that we have to play here. Just wait and see what happens. And now we're starting to see the outside line fade as it's down to just Dwayne Vincent and Sean Boundy. Pretty much everybody else has bailed out, and now Boundy has bailed out as well. So Dwayne Vincent's going to go from racing for the lead to being probably well outside of the top 10 by the time he finds a spot in line. And actually, somebody's going to let him in. It looks like Boundy let him in, so he's not going to lose as much ground as he could have. He's going to fall outside the top 5. I believe he'll fall back to about 7th or so in line, maybe 6th in line now. But just got in line very luckily right there, and he's able to keep some of that track position. And now we see just 3 cars out on the outside line trying to make something happen towards the back half of this group here. And it looks like Austin Coop is the guy out in front trying to make that charge happen. He's bringing along Nelson Rivera and David Comstock, but there's just not enough cars up there for them to be able to do anything.
Not enough cars to really be able to do much of anything at all for those drivers in the back. In the meantime, though, we'd like to take a moment to remind you that tonight's coverage of the RealSimRacing.com Full Throttle Cup Series on LSRTV is brought to you by Hippie's Paint Shop. Hippie's Paint Shop has over 5 years of experience providing top-quality custom paint schemes for all iRacing vehicles at a low price. Because after all, at Hippie's Paint Shop, the cost isn't high, just the painter. As you look at the rear bumper of one of their most prolific customers, Dwayne Vincent, of all people, who we've talked about a lot already, Douglas Wyatt, also carrying the Hippies colors, and Doug Roth, another one who is a longtime Hippies customer and a longtime competitor here in the Full Throttle Cup Series.
And he's one of those drivers that could come in here and get his second victory here at the Talladega Superspeedway, one of only 2 that could make that happen. And right now he's running in the 18th position, started all the way back in 25th, so he's going in the right direction. And with a little bit of luck, he could find himself up inside the top 10 and possibly be able to get up there and do just that later on in the race. But for right now, he's got his work cut out for him because he's trying to work through this little bit of traffic. And for the most part, everybody is still single file on the bottom of the racetrack. And it looks like he's also included in that single file brigade on the bottom. Still have about 4 cars out there that are trying to make something happen, but they just don't have the numbers right now. And that's the hardest thing, is trying to build up enough cars on the outside line to get that line going. Because once people start to bail out, they typically don't want to go back up there. And you really have to work hard to make people see that they can get back up there and make something happen. And so far, that just hasn't been the case for these guys.
Here's an analogy for you, which I don't think most people would expect, but I think it's very appropriate. A Jenga tower. because it takes so long to get those lines built up, and then if one person just decides to slide out of it, the whole thing usually comes crashing down, and everybody just drops back to the bottom, and you have to restart all over again from the back to the front if you want to build up the outside line. And right now, I think that outside line's at a very interesting spot, because you don't have enough drivers up there to really make a charge towards the front of the field, but you have enough to at least maintain pace. It feels like you get one or two more cars up there on the top side, but that line might be able to become something. And I think you just got to stop and look at that and wonder, okay, how interesting is that? And who's going to want to jump up that way?
Well, the rule of thumb at Talladega or Daytona in the Cup car is you need to have at least 5 or 6 on the outside line in order for something to happen, in order for you to be able to carry that momentum to get to the front of the field. And right now it looks like they are starting to get there, as it looks like they have 5. The problem is they have so far to go. It's going to take them quite a while. And they also have the issue of they're not being bunched up the way they need to be. There's a pretty big gap back from Austin Coop to Nelson Rivera, and then another small gap back from Nelson Rivera to David Comstock. So this outside line just isn't very organized right now, and combine that with the fact that they just don't have enough cars, they're just not able to do anything with this run. Even though they can pass 2 or 3 cars down the straightaway, when they get to the corners, they just can't continue that momentum and get closer to the front.
Brandon Bowie, meanwhile, at the front of this field and doing a really nice job of racking up the laps here. And oh, well, there we go. There's one car that nearly goes to the outside, and that nearly was a big problem, because Shane Ewing just slightly got into the rear of AJ Browning, but it was almost enough to turn the 20 around in the middle of the back straight. So got a little bit scary there, but now you've got 2 more cars in that outside line, and they look like they're finally making moves. Here comes Dylan Jones to the top side. We'll see if Brandon Bowie decides to block them. He won't. And Jones is going to get a big head of steam. He might just take the lead at the moment when they get to the stripe, and will easily by a car length. So much so that he'll jump down to the bottom and go pick up Brandon Bowie, who now sits in the 3rd position.
And that was an incredible display of what it takes to use the outside line and get to the front. And for Dylan Jones, he had the race lead, but it's going to be short-lived, because now to his outside line, he's got a challenge from AJ Browning. It looks like AJ Browning is going to easily get clear of the race lead, and now he moves to the bottom of the racetrack as well. And that's now going to leave out there trying to take the race lead. Sean Ewing is now, Brandon Bowie goes around in the middle of the corner. It looks like they're going to gather it back up, but it looks like a bump draft gone wrong for the 44 machine. Almost was calamity for this entire field, but somehow he was able to keep that car straight on the apron and was able to hang on to it. And that looks like Anthony DeBarro was the one that was behind him. This gave him a bump draft going into the corner, and it unfortunately turned him sideways, jumbled these guys up, and it knocked Bowie out of the draft. But no wrecked cars, I think, is the most important part that came out of that.
The problem, though, is 2 of our Aegis Motorsports drivers got caught up with significant damage in that. Daniel Eberhardt and Andrew Frenars made contact. I think it might have been Douglas Wyatt that got into the rear bumper of Frenars. He just got shot on the outside wall, and Eberhardt had nowhere to go. So those are 2 of your playoff contenders who were just trying to avoid trouble, and now it has come to find them in the back of the field. It goes back, I think, to what a lot of drivers said in the build-up to the race at Talladega, that even though you could try and plan to avoid trouble, it can really find you anywhere. There's not really a perfect strategy that you can use to avoid getting caught up in a wreck here.
Well, and this is why I said before the race started that I don't like this strategy of hanging out in the back, because like what just happened with Daniel Eberhardt and with Andrew Frenars, they were just trying to stay out of trouble. They were in a spot where they felt like they were safe, but because of some circumstances that were outside of their control, they got caught up, and now they have some pretty significant damage. It looks like Eberhardt is going to be able to continue, but for Frenars, I believe his night's just about over, as he has got some very significant damage that more than likely is going to keep him out of this race. It definitely has him out of contention, but it almost kills his chances of even getting back out on the track.
It all depends on if we get another big wreck and when that comes. I imagine he's probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 minutes of repair time on pit road. So that's not all of this race, but it's enough to make you stuck for a bit. And if everybody keeps on going here, I think probably about 20 to 25 laps would be the gap that I would need to see before I'd call anybody out and done for the night. Because anything within that, if you get another wreck and the right time at the right point, you can make some laps up. And for Friedars in particular, those would be very, very valuable. It would be worth it to come back out on the track if he could, because every point will matter in this fight to make the round of 8.
Oh, I absolutely believe they'll work on getting that car fixed so they can get him back out there. The problem is with it being already lap 26 in this race, if it stays green and he has to sit there on pit road for 30 minutes getting damage fixed, he's going to lose about 30 laps. I don't know if there's going to be enough laps left for him to make anything up if we don't get a caution here to slow the pace down and give the team some time to fix that car without losing laps every 49 seconds. It's going to be very difficult for them, and especially considering he's 6th in the playoff grid coming into tonight. He can't afford to have a night like this. It's not going to be a very good night for him if he can't catch a couple of breaks.
He'll need a few, but A.J. Browning doesn't need any at the moment. He's got the race lead, and we're looking at a very, very split-up field. I think that little incident, though it wasn't huge, was enough just to get everybody shook enough, in the words of Evan Pasoko, to kind of space themselves out and avoid running into each other. So now you've got a few mini-packs here. This first pack is Browning, Dylan Jones, Austin Coop up in 3rd, and then Corey Wolf and Shane Ewing. That's your top 5. Then you go back about a second, you've got the next group. Dwayne Vincent, Anthony Nabarro, Nelson Rivera, David Comstock, Trevor Roppolo. Then you go back 3 seconds, you've got Dakota Bowman, Sean Boundy, Tanner Tallarico, Gabe Wood, Nick Silver and company, and that might be your, I guess, meaty pack, the big pack where most of these racers are.
Yeah, we're just looking at these guys getting all spread out right now, and Eberhardt just went a lap down, which is a very bad moment for him as well, because he's got some pretty significant damage to that car, and I'm not sure that he's going to be able to stay in the draft at this point, as we see the lead pack already has drove away from him and has pretty much kicked him out of their draft already. He's trying to get up to speed, and he might be able to hang on to the next draft because he is pulling some pretty good speed right now. But this is a sketchy moment for Eberhardt as well, because if this thing stays green for a while and he can't get the damage fixed and can't get back on the lead lap, he could potentially be looking at a major points deficit going into next week at Kansas, which is not what he needs at all. It's not going to be a good night for him here. As you see, this second group is trying to catch him and also trying to catch the race leaders, and that's led by Dwayne Vincent. Right now they're about 1.8 seconds behind these guys, and I believe being lined up the way they are, they'll be able to get back to the front and be able to get back in that lead pack. It's just going to take them a handful of laps to do so.
So we'll see how that shakes out. Also of note, they've dumped one of the Aegis cars. Well, actually, no, I take that back. They dumped Daniel Eberhardt from the front of the second train of cars. Eberhardt already a lap down in this, so I suppose it doesn't necessarily matter at the moment. Though, he would be in position to get the lucky dog if we got another yellow, interestingly enough. So that might be something we keep an eye on, at least for the next few laps. The next car up the road is Ross Cato in the running order, and he is about half a lap ahead of A.J. Browning, your race leader, along with Doug Roth.
Yeah, and with those two being able to draft together, they'll be able to stay on the lead lap for a little while longer, but they're not going to be able to stay on the lead lap for the remainder of this race if it stays green, because unfortunately right now they're running almost 2 full seconds slower than the rest of the field. So definitely going to need a break, and for Doug Roth, I can see some damage on the front end of that number 43 machine. That's certainly slowing these guys down a little bit, so they're going to need to catch a lucky break, or they'll be taking that lucky dog position away from Daniel Eberhardt before long. And Eberhardt, I'm watching right now, him and Trevor Roppolo are working together. Looks like Trevor is trying to hang back and keep him in the draft. The problem is I don't think it's working, and it's going to cost Trevor an opportunity to stay in the draft altogether, because he's almost lost touch with the guys in front of him.
Trevor's got a little bit of damage on the front end of his Ford Fusion as well. Don't quite know where it came from, but he might be less well-suited to lead that pairing than Daniel Eberhardt, because you're right, they are starting to gap him, and he is starting to slide, and those two are heading back towards that next group where you've got Dakota Bowman and Sean Boundy and Tanner Tallarico and company.
Yeah, and they're quite a ways back, almost 4 seconds back from the two of them. And the group that they were drafting with is almost caught back up to the race leaders, as Dwayne Vincent has done a really good job getting the draft from the guys in front of him. And I'd say within the next lap or so, he's going to be there and be able to compete with those guys. Now, the question becomes, does he take that run that he's going to have and try to go to the outside line, or does he decide he's going to stay on the bottom and stay behind these guys? It's going to be a very interesting call for him to see what he decides to do here, because when he gets there, he's going to have a really good head of steam, and he could make that move. The problem is, if those guys behind him don't go with him, it's going to stall out very quickly.
You need help. You need friends. That's the moral of the story here. You see it. Austin Coop just tried to duck to the outside of Shane Ewing and get something going with the cars that are coming up behind him, because we've got company here. Dwayne Vincent has brought the second group back to the rear of the first group. They are effectively connected, and the only two that are hanging out the back of that are Trevor Roppolo and Daniel Eberhard, as we mentioned a few laps ago. So back now to what looks like 10 cars here in this lead pack. 9 cars, actually, I think, excluding Roppolo and Daniel Eberhard.
Yeah, and I think they're going to lose the draft here pretty quickly. They're almost 0.7 of a second out of it, and as these guys get closer to the lead pack, they're going to pick up their speed, and I just don't believe that those 2 cars back there are going to be able to carry enough speed to stay with them. So unfortunately, it looks like they're going to have to fall back to the pack behind them and try to blend in with them. And then we also have to think about green flag pit stops. We're pretty close to that window where we're going to start seeing these guys come in. I think the fuel window is between 35 and 40 laps, so we're getting very close to that window where we might see them coming in. Might see some of these guys try to stretch it, since this is only an 85 lap race, see if they can't try to make it to like lap 42 or 43 to make it a one-stop race to the end.
Oh, wouldn't a caution just make everybody's life a lot easier in terms of pit strategy now, wouldn't it? Because I know they're all looking for it. It's close. Every time we come here, 85 laps is really, really hard to do on 2 tanks of fuel. It's possible, but you have to have the cards fall in the right places. You have to catch the yellows at the right times. You have to avoid trouble, avoid wrecks, and you have to make sure that you fill it full of fuel every single time you come down pit road. And it's easier said than done, both in real life and in this sim.
Yeah, and getting on the pit road here is one of the most difficult things to do, because there are so many different factors that are being involved in that. You've got other guys around you that you have to avoid. You have to worry about getting your car down from almost 200 miles an hour all the way down to pit road speed at 55 miles an hour, and you don't have very long to do it. When you come off turn 4, while it may look like a big stretch of asphalt there, yeah, that pit road comes up on you very quickly when you're trying to get slowed down. And then you also have to make sure that you stay on pit road. You don't want to slide out into the grass, because then you're going to have a penalty for unsafe pit exit, and that's going to bring you back to pit road and cause you to lose the draft and have some big issues. So from a driver's standpoint, pitting under green is probably one of the most treacherous things. You would prefer to have a caution right around this time. That way you can just come down and just have to worry about getting down the speed from pace speed. And now we have some guys pitting. I hear that Nick Silver in the number 24 machine has announced that he's going to be coming to pit road this time by, and indeed a big group of cars from that third pack back there, they have come to pit road. It looks like Sean Casto, Gabe Wood, a handful of others, maybe Sean Boundy as well, all on pit road for their first stops, and Nick Silver almost had a scary moment coming on the pit road.
And Dakota Bowman had an even worse moment on pit road, because he spun that number 59 machine around on pit entry. Don't quite know how he ended up backwards at the entry to pit road. I think, he just locked it up. Just tried to get on the brakes too hard, and I think Gabe Wood got a little lucky. It looked like he ghosted through the 59 there, but a lot of left front damage to that number 59 machine after just a simple error, I think, on his part.
Well, and that's one of those deals where coming on the pit road is just so difficult to do. He was trying to get the car slowed down. He realized he wasn't going to make pit road speed by the time he got to the commitment cone, so he started getting on the brakes harder, and it caused the wheels to lock up, and that's what caused him to spin around. And unfortunately, it has brought an end to his night, as we have seen him disconnect from the server, so he can be chalked up as not coming back to this race, and I believe he might be our first exit from the race here tonight. So unfortunate for him there, but a lucky break on, like you said, for Gabe Wood. He was able to get through that cleanly and not have any issues. Just lucky that he wasn't caught up in that.
So Bowman becomes the first proper retirement of the race. If you're Freenars, there's a point that you can go grab because the gap isn't terrible. It's only, I believe, 13 laps from Freenars to Bowman. That's doable if they can get that car back out on track. And that 1 point, you never know how useful they can be until we get to the end of a round and we have the chance to use 2020 hindsight.
And while all that's going on, a couple more of our leaders are on pit road. AJ Browning, Shane Ewing, Nelson Rivera, David Comstock all have made their way to pit road. Everybody got on the pit road cleanly, and they're in their box getting their service. It's going to be 2 tires for AJ Browning and a full tank of gas. It looks like that's going to be the same call all the way down pit road for the other 3 drivers that were on pit road with him, and AJ Browning is the first one off. David Comstock's going to get out right behind him, and now they have to work on getting up to speed and have to stay on the apron until they get to the exit of turn 2, which is another trick in its own because this apron has just a little bit of banking, and the faster you start going, the more treacherous it gets. You can lose grip down there and possibly spin the car out, but they're going to get off pit road cleanly, and it looks like they're going to have a pretty good gap over the cars behind them as they get up to speed.
Pretty sizable lead for the most part for most of these drivers. You look at everybody here in the realm of things, and you don't see that second pack of cars with DeBarra and company for about 3 to 4 seconds behind some of your Lodestar Racing guys in front of this field. AJ Browning and Shane Ewing in particular, sandwiched in by the Turn 1 hero driver David Comstock.
And we have a penalty coming from green flag pit stops here. We actually have 2 penalties coming from green flag pit stops. Dwayne Vincent and Trevor Rapolo, both black flagged for the same thing. They drove through too many pit stalls as they were leaving their pit boxes, and unfortunately for both of them, they will have to serve a stop and go penalty under green flag, which is going to make things very difficult for both of them. And that is 2 of our playoff contenders that are now having to serve this pit stop. So without the break of a caution, James, this could shake up the playoff grid just a little bit more. We've already had issues with Daniel Eberhardt and Andrew Freenars, now potentially disaster for 2 more of our playoff contenders.
Well, now I think if you're Dwayne Vincent, you're just fighting Eberhardt to make sure that you're the first car off the lead lap. You absolutely have got to be the guy that gets the free pass now. As you see, both Rapolo and Vincent come in to serve those penalties. So, but you have to make sure that you are in position to get the lucky dog. Whether or not we get one is completely irrelevant to you at this point, because you at least just have to put yourself in the position to make things happen. And the only way to get back to the front, especially in Vincent's case, since he needs it the most, having missed the race last week, is to get it via yellow some way, somehow.
Yeah, this is not the hole that Dwayne Vincent needed here tonight, as he's got his penalty served. He's getting back on the racetrack, and as of right now, he's still in the lead, or on the lead lap. And now AJ Browning is making a surprise pit stop, as he was the race leader, and now he's coming back to pit road. I didn't see anything about a penalty. Oh, actually, yeah, he did have a penalty as well. He also got black flag for driving through too many pit stalls on the exit to pit road. So unfortunate break for another one of our race leaders, as he too is going to have to serve a stop and go on pit road, and that's going to shuffle the lead to the 42 of David Comstock now, as he leads Shane Ewing, Anthony DeBarro, and Nelson Rivera right now at the front.
So that obviously hurts for Browning, but I think that also hurts for Shane Ewing as well, because he was having a lot of fun running up there with his teammate, and now it's just one man from Lodestar up there, and you have to go back to Brandon Bowie, who currently sits in the 13th position, to find the other driver out of that trio that's running in this race and hasn't served a penalty to this point. So splitting up the front of the field, I'm trying to find teammates here wherever they are up near the front of this thing. The closest thing I can see is Dylan Jones and Daniel Eberhardt, even though Eberhardt's a lap down, but those two with the PowerTech Aegis Alliance are about the closest thing we have to proper teammates at the front of the field here.
While that's going on, I was just clicking through and looking at a couple of the other drivers, and I'm a little confused as to what's going on between Dwayne Vincent and Trevor Roppolo right now, because they are both have served that penalty and are trying to stay on the lead lap. The problem is they're not with anybody, but they're only about a second and a half from each other on the racetrack. I don't really understand why they're not trying to work together to get up to speed. At the very least, they could stay with the lead pack and then try to duke it out for the lucky dog position, assuming we were to get a caution. They're going to get swallowed up by this field here in the next lap or so, if that even. And with no drafting help, they're going to get pushed right out of that draft very quickly. So not really sure why they're not working together, but it's going to cost both of them dearly as they get ready to get lapped.
Will be tricky, will be crazy, I think, because I've got to believe those guys are just going to fight with everything they've got to make sure that they don't end up, if, not necessarily in the same lap, just to make sure that you don't get caught too far behind them, because the battle here for the first car lap down is right in the hands of Dwayne Vincent and Daniel Eberhardt. Eberhardt's about to come up here and pass Vincent in the draft, so even though they're way, way back in the field in 20th and in 23rd, respectively, you've got a guy that you're racing heads up for position there, and I think if you're Vincent, you have to try and find a way to get around the 90 car.
Well, and he's going to have his work cut out for him, because Trevor Roppolo is one of the team cars to the 90 of Eberhardt as well. And then you've also got Dylan Jones right there trying to help them out as well. So I think Dwayne's in a tricky spot. It's going to be difficult for him. But now the interesting call becomes, if you're Trevor Roppolo, do you fight with your teammate, or do you try to just stay back there and hope that you get a lucky break and you can both get the lucky or the lead lap? This could be a situation where we might see those Aegis PowerTech guys hook up, try to get Eberhardt and Roppolo in front and see if they can't go to the front of this pack. If they can push both of them ahead of David Comstock and get them clear to the race lead, or to the lead of this pack, they'd both be back on the lead lap, and then if we get a caution, they don't have to worry about the lucky dog. They'd be back on the lead lap the old-fashioned way and be able to come around and join the field.
So, will Daniel Eberhardt follow his teammate? Will Dwayne Vincent be able to come up and take advantage of the teamwork there to go get himself back in the lucky dog position? These questions and more we'll answer, well, not next week, but how about on the other side of our iRacing Midway Race Break, which is brought to you by iRacing, the world's leading motorsport simulation. Developed from the beginning as a centralized racing and competition service, iRacing organizes, hosts, and officiates races on virtual tracks all around the world. In the fast-paced world of esports, iRacing is a one-stop shop for online racing. Officially sanctioned racing from NASCAR, IndyCar, IMSA, the World of Outlaws, the Cars Tour, USAC, and more. And of course, as we try and go through the Midway Race Break, we get the big one in the yellow flag that happens and just totally screws everything up. And this all started, I think, much, much further ahead of where I was looking at the time. But somehow, Nelson Rivera got down on the apron, and I don't quite know how. I think, did he get help? Yes. I think he got help from, I want to say that might have been Dwayne Vincent. And somehow, Daniel Eberhardt just had nowhere to go. He got squeezed. He got pinched down a little bit by Dylan Jones, and then bounced off into Vincent, and that set Rivera up the track, and that cleaned out a decent amount of guys in that moment.
Yeah, that was a huge wreck, and it took out two of our playoff contenders that were both fighting for the lucky dog, and I believe, unfortunately for Trevor Roppolo, he got incident points when that wreck happened, and per the iRacing scoring, if you get incident points from a wreck, you do not get credited with the lucky dog. So while he made it through and would technically be the first car one lap down, he will not be credited with the lucky dog as a result of that. So unfortunate break for all three of those playoff contenders, and a huge disappointment for Dwayne Vincent and for Daniel Eberhardt.
So Vincent basically goes into a must-win position at Kansas. I think that's about the only thing you could really draw from that. Eberhardt will have to race hard to make sure that he's in a decent position. I don't think his situation was nearly as dire, since he had a decent buffer of about 21 points on Brandon Bowie, who currently holds that 8th and final position to transfer. But still, going to be tough for those guys. And, as experienced as they are, the additional pressure will change the way that they race significantly. And you can try and be as cool as you like if you want, but I think in a situation like this, to try and shake it off and make it appear as if you weren't feeling anything on the inside would be lying to yourself, lying to everybody else, because we know it gets very, very tense, both in the real world and in the sim when you're running in races like these, where you can transfer to the next round.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge week next week for those guys. Meanwhile, we do have some pit stops going on. Everybody came back to pit road. They wanted to get fuel here and get down and away cleanly. Looks like Anthony DeBarro will be the first car off of pit road. I believe he's going to go with fuel only. David Comstock took 2 tires. He'll come out in second. And then everybody else on pit road decided to go with 4 tires, as Shane Ewing will come out in that 3rd position. Sean Boundy is 4th. Tanner Tallarico will be 5th. And then Austin Coop is 6th. Brandon Bowie now 7th. Sean Casto 8th. Nick Silver 9th. And Carl Shedd rounds out the top 10.
For the moment, though, we'll still have to see how this cycles about and see who takes the wave around, who jumps up a few spots, who ends up getting some form of a pit penalty. And I believe Sean Casto might have been guilty of just that, seeing here that he drove through too many pit stalls on exit. So not the first time we've seen that tonight. Dwayne Vincent got it. Trevor Roppolo got it. AJ Browning got it. Casto becomes the 4th man, so I think it'll be a little bit easier for him since this is under yellow. He'll just have to drop to the tail end of the longest line, basically. But still, the track position can mean something here, and we're starting to get to the point where it matters a little bit more.
It does matter, but at least this happened under caution and not under a round of green flag pit stops. That's going to be a very pivotal moment, and I'm crunching some numbers here, James, because that's what I seem to do best. And I was looking at when these guys pitted for the first time here today, and it was right around lap 36 is when we started seeing some of these guys come in, which tells me that fuel window is between 35 and 40 laps, and they have 37 laps to go. So now, if it stays green, do they have enough fuel to make it to the end? That's going to be a big, big question for a lot of these guys.
If we don't have another yellow flag. But as our friend Darrell Waltrip likes to say, cautions do have a habit of breeding cautions. So if we get everybody bunched up together, now that everything is starting to wind its way down, we're in the back half of this race, it will get a little bit more tense. You will see the intensity come up ever so little, bit by bit, until it all just explodes in the final goings of this race.
And it's going to be very interesting. Just have to wait and see what happens. And I'm looking, and we have several drivers that have come back to pit road and are topping off. So I believe that answers the question on whether or not these guys think they have enough fuel to make it to the end. They wanted to come back to pit road one final time and see if they can't get just a little bit extra fuel that might stretch them to the end of this thing without having to come back down the rest of the race. Be interesting to see if anybody else decides to do that. We have at least one more lap around before the lights are going to go off on the pace car, so that could open that door for them, but this could also help some of these guys that have elected to stay on the racetrack. Another lap under caution keeps them from having to worry about running at full speed, and I hear a lot of these guys are clutching the motors right now. I can see several of these drivers at the front. Anthony DeBarro, Shane Ewing, David Comstock, all these guys have shut their cars off, so they are definitely in fuel conservation mode at this point.
So I'll ask you, Driver Macklin, and or Crew Chief Macklin, and or anybody else, if you're in this position, how do you want to handle this, and what do you do, and what do you think is the right call here? Because I think you've got two very valid lines of thinking between the track position that you keep if you don't come down, and the assurance of making it to the end on fuel if you do come down, but you lose the track position. So where do you go with this, and which way do you think is the right way to go?
And see, that is a very tricky decision. If I'm the driver, I want to stay out here. I want to trust that my car has enough fuel. I want to trust that I can save enough fuel to get to the end, and I don't want to come back to pit road. But if I'm a crew chief, I'm telling my guy, look, I don't want to take that chance. You need to get your butt back down pit road and get some fuel. So it's going to be a very difficult decision. I think a lot of it also comes into what your situation is as far as the playoffs are concerned. If you're one of the playoff drivers, you might want to play it safe here and come to pit road, as we saw a couple of those guys do. Carl Shedd was on pit road. I believe I saw Nelson Rivera on pit road. Dylan Jones was back on pit road. So a handful of our playoff drivers were on pit road there one final time to top that car off, and they may come back again this time just to play it safe. But if you're one of the drivers that's not in the playoffs, that doesn't have anything to lose, if you're Anthony DeBarro, what's it matter if you stay out and run out of gas? You don't have a win. It's not going to help you advance to the next round. Go get that win and try to get your first win of the season.
So you'll have some chasing the win. Others do come down pit road, this time by, it's Chris Hurlow, Lionel Calisto, and I believe the last car of that bunch is Trevor Roppolo in the 9 car to come and get service and get a little bit more fuel here on pit road to try and make sure that he's good to go to the end of this race.
Well, and Trevor Roppolo got lucky. While he wasn't able to get the lucky dog because he was involved in that wreck, it could have been much worse than it was. He could have been in the same situation that Dwayne Vincent and Daniel Eberhardt were in. Instead, he's still only 1 lap down with some damage to the front end of that car, but he still has an opportunity to make up some points here where Daniel Eberhardt and Dwayne Vincent, it's going to be a little bit harder, and same thing for Andrew Freenarge, who are all still sitting down on pit road getting service. I believe Dwayne Vincent is out for the race. Eberhardt, I think he might be getting that car serviced, as well as Andrew Freenarge, so going to be interesting to see what happens with those guys back there.
And while they do that, let's see if we can go back to our midway race break now that we've got some moments, and we'll reset this field for you before they take their green flag on lap 51. Also, we'll make a special note that iRacing will now be home to action from Red Bull Global Rallycross. Just announced earlier today that Global Rallycross will be the next discipline of motorsport that is on the simulation. I think we're all excited to have that form of very wild, very crazy racing on the sim. Anthony DeBarro will lead them to green. David Comstock will be second. Shane Ewing rolls from third. Sean Bounty is fourth. Tanner Tallarico fifth. Austin Coop sixth. Brandon Bowie seventh. Nick Silver eighth. Gabe Wood ninth. Carl Shedd 10th.
11th through 20th right here, Dylan Jones, Eric Stanford, Ross Cato, David Washington, Sean Casto is 15th. Then we have Doug Roth in 16th. 17th goes to Lionel Calisto. Christopher Hurlow is 18th. 19th is A.J. Browning. He's the last guy on the lead lap. And then Trevor Roppolo is 20th.
1 lap down, Bruce Pearson, 21st. 3 laps down, 22nd, Nelson Rivera. Eberhardt, Vincent, Wolf, 23rd, 4th, 5th. 4 laps down, out of the race. Dakota Bowman, Douglas Wyatt, and Andrew Freenarz. As we get the green flag here, back to make things happen. DeBarro goes up through the gears, and you've got Comstock coming there too with a decent amount of help. They'll go to the outside, then jump back in, and Ewing will be the beneficiary. He gets to slide behind them. It'll be Sean Boundy up there with Austin Coop trying to at the outside line work, but they just don't have any help.
And they have help now. Is coming off turn 2. Here comes David Comstock. He pulled up to the outside line. He's making the move, and he has got the run as they head to turn 3. Can he get clear of Anthony DeBarro as they get to the corner? Doesn't look like he's going to be able to get clear, and now they will stay side by side for the race lead as they work through 3 and 4. Sean Boundy is trying to give Comstock that push that he needs as they come off the corner, and now DeBarro doesn't really have a lot of help as Shane Ewing's a little bit off of his back bumper. This could help Comstock on the outside line as they come back to the stripe. Looks like Comstock's going to have the advantage, and he will lead as they come back around here to complete lap number 51, but he still can't get clear to the bottom.
Comstock to the point here, and I think interestingly enough, Nick Silver's the only car making the difference on the bottom. Otherwise, it's 2 by 3 all the way through that first pack. So an even split between the top and the bottom. We haven't seen that much tonight, but I think it's proof that you can get guys running up there with you. You can make a difference because David Comstock just leapt way out in front of everything and then promptly decided to drop back down, and that probably will shoot Boundy and Coop back a little bit as they are now just 2 cars on the outside to the, I believe, 5 there on the inside.
And And right now there's only about 8 cars running up at the front of the field, as you've got these 7, and then you've got Brandon Bowie trying to tag along, and then you've also got right behind him Carl Shedd trying to get closer to the front of the field, but then everybody else is kind of falling back at this point, just kind of hanging out, waiting to see what's going to happen. So it looks like you got Dylan Jones trying to make a little bit of a run here behind these guys, but it's gotten very quiet at the front of the field right now, kind of like what we saw at the beginning of the race. They got single file pretty quickly, they rode around for a while, then they started making some moves. It's not quite like that as Sean Bounty goes back to the point here, as he got a great run and was able to take the race lead, but it's starting to form up that way, as now there's only 1 car on the outside line, and that's Austin Coop.
Coop hung out to dry up there on the top side. Everybody else comes down to the bottom and just gets right in line. So looks like the agenda for most of these guys up front is the same. Just make sure that you don't end up wrecking yourself too early like we saw a lot of drivers do yesterday. You take yourself out of contention, because you do have to make it to the end of the race to actually have a shot to win. It's a very basic, a very simple fact, but one that I think a lot of people often forget, especially here at the plate tracks, as Coop finally finds his way down to the bottom line.
Yeah, and he was in no man's land if he didn't get back to the bottom, and then as soon as he goes down there, he jumps right back out to the outside line, but the problem is he has nobody to go with him, and Austin Coop is out there by himself once again in no man's land, as Brandon Bowie is going to get underneath of him, and more than likely we'll see Carl Shedd make the same move to get under him as well. Fortunately, he can't lose too many positions if he can get back to the bottom soon. There is a little bit of a gap right behind Carl Shedd, but if he doesn't get down there in a hurry, he could potentially lose another 5 positions, because there's 5 more cars coming that are going to have a head of steam that could go right by him.
And I think more importantly, close the gap up in between Carl Shedd in the 45 and Dylan Jones there in the 11 car, who's got help from Eric Stanford in the 19. And all 3 of those are part of the PowerTech Aegis Alliance. It's indicated by all the pink that you're seeing for breast cancer awareness, since it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Also see it on Coop's car as well. So he somehow finds a way. I don't know how he found the gap in between those 3, but he somehow managed to do that. But while we are on the subject of breast cancer awareness, good a time as any to remind all of the ladies and even sometimes the men, it is not a disease that is limited to females out there. It can strike males as well, but if you feel a little bit nervous, you feel, well, go get screened. Screening saves lives, and you can never do it too early and enough. So, with all that pink in our picture at the moment, we'll see a whole bunch of strategy plays, I think, come about from these guys. And as I suspected, up to the top side go the Aegis and the PowerTech drivers, and you got Gabe Wood down there too. He'll try and hook up with the 46 of Sean Castro, who's still trying to race his way back to the front after that pit road penalty. Hasn't had a lot of luck to the moment, but certainly is making for some entertaining side-by-side racing.
And here comes Tanner Tallarico. He jumped up in front of Nick Silver to take that momentum that the outside line was beginning to form, and he has made his way to the outside of the second place car on the bottom, David Comstock, and now as they come to the backstretch, he's trying to carry that momentum to the outside of Sean Boundy. Not quite enough speed or steam going for him right now, but they have a big run here as they head to turn 3, just trying to get closer and closer to the front. And now, James, as we're inside 30 laps to go, this is where you really have to start positioning yourself to be in position to go for the win at the end of the race. We're getting down to crunch time. You don't want to be at the back of this pack with 10 to go. You want to be as close to the front as possible, and that means the aggression levels are going to start picking up, which could lead to that big one that we're so afraid of seeing. As these guys get more aggressive, the big one's going to get closer and closer to possibly happening, and unfortunately it may end up happening before this thing is all said and done.
We'll watch. We'll see. At the moment, though, I think it's important to note that Andrew Freenarts is back out on track, trying to make up a few of the positions that he lost when he got caught up in that wreck, as Anthony Navarro goes to the top side, trying to get around Sean Boundy in the 34. So Freenarts is 100% trying to pick up those few extra points, because they might make the difference between him making it into the round of 8 and him getting eliminated here in the round of 12. A disappointing day for the man who won here in the spring. He won't repeat that feat, but he can still salvage something from this yet.
as it looks like he's going to pass Douglas Wyatt here in the next lap or so, and then potentially Dakota Bowman and possibly Corey Wolf, Dwayne Vincent, and a handful of others. That could be about 6 points that he could get to make up here tonight. And like you mentioned, those points are ever so valuable. It could be the difference between him getting eliminated from this round and moving on to the round of 8. So very interesting to see that happen. Meanwhile, DeBarro, he had a big run about a half a lap ago, had gotten all the way to the door of Sean Boundy, but everybody started bailing out, and now he's out there by himself as Tanner Tallarico was the final guy out there. It looks like he's going to try to squeeze to the inside line, but Tanner's not going to let him, and now here comes Austin Coop as they can make contact. Tanner Tallarico, DeBarro make contact back into the field, and a huge wreck, the big one here on the front stretch.
Big wreck here, trying to see who got caught up in it. I saw Anthony DeBarro definitely got a little bit of damage. He wrecked in nearly the same exact place that he got caught up in trouble here in the spring. So Tallarico goes. They come up the track. Who did they collect? Brandon Bowie got caught up in it. Sean Casto got a decent amount of damage. It looked like, for the most part, everybody got away. Eric Stanford with a little bit of damage there. Beyond that, not too many others. So a surprisingly small amount of cars that ended up in trouble for where that wreck took place, but still a lot of damage there all around.
A lot of damage and a huge disappointment for the number 44 of Brandon Bowie, as he was caught up in that wreck. Heavy damage to his machine. I believe he's going to be able to continue, but he is definitely going to be down on speed for the remainder of this race. And he came in, James, holding the cutoff spot to make it to the round of 8. He was 8th coming in. He's probably going to gain a couple of positions with Friedenarge and Eberhardt having some issues, but now he's going to have to go a little bit on defense for the end of this thing, and he too may have to be in a win and you're in situation next week at Kansas, depending on how the points fall after this thing.
Lots of pressure, which means that we should expect to see lots of guys practicing, I think, and trying to compile big notebooks of data and a lot of lap times and a lot of long green flag runs under their belt between now and next Monday night to make sure that they've got the best speed for Kansas. But, Mr. Macklin, do you know the best tool out there to record all of that information?
Why, it would be Joe Real Timing. That's a great system to use, and definitely something that you want to check out. RSR uses it here in the Full Throttle Cup Series, and LSRTV uses it pretty much everywhere we go. And our coverage actually tonight is being brought to you by Joe Real Timing, the official timing software of LSRTV. Whether you spend your time on the sim behind the wheel, on the pit box, or from the spotter stand, JRT is the go-to software for iRacing timing and scoring analytics. Get yourself a basic download for free, or get the pro version today at joe-real-timing.com.
Well, shoot. You took the words right out of my mouth, Mr. Macklin. Fair play to you. Well done.
You caught me off guard, but I was ready. I've gotten a little bit of experience under my belt, and I was ready for that one when you tried to catch me right there, but we're all good.
So, now that we've got that covered, hearing that Sean Boundy is going to come in and might be topping off fuel is my initial suspicion. Oh. Well, our producer was a little bit unclear with that last note. Probably too busy chowing on a Chicago hot dog to tell me that instead of coming into pit road, we've got Sean Boundy up here in the booth with us. And Sean, can you just talk about what you've seen from behind the seat? It looks like, especially within these last 20 laps, that the racing has really started to pick up.
Well, within these last 20 laps, I guess ever since that mid-race caution, I've had most of the stuff behind me. So it's been a tough race. It's definitely a much different experience in these cars versus the Xfinity or the trucks. Their drafting package is incredible with these. You got to be stuck to the bottom to do pretty much anything. But if you get a good group of guys and a strong group of guys, you can get a couple runs up to the front. And fortunately, we had a couple good runs to get from where I was in 4th up to the lead. But it's a tough race. Very calm, patient race, though. We've had a lot of different experiences at this track in this series, and this is, in my opinion, one of the more tame rides I've had here, and a lot of that has to do with this draft package. It doesn't present too much opportunity, so you got to fight hard to create an opportunity and manipulate other cars around you and form groups.
And to help you with that, you've got Shane Ewing and AJ Browning, who have all come together and put a really strong night so far together for Lodestar. You guys are all in the top 10. What sort of plans do you have to work together and try and close this one out?
Well, I don't know what they're doing. I've been with Prestige tonight with Silver and Castro and Gabe. I know Ewing's a good guy, and he likes driving around me, and we do pretty good. So I'm hoping that there's a little bit of faith and loyalty there, giving me some good pushes, and as well as my main teammate DeBarro was up here running with me, and he's unfortunately out of it. So just forming a few allegiances before this race to get some more guys on our side, because you're going to need a lot of help, a little bit of luck and a lot of help. But there's not too much I can do from the front of this pack here. I just got to look in the mirror, don't make any bad blocking decisions, and just hope the guys behind me know what they're doing.
And finally, we know there are a lot of drivers who are close on fuel, who aren't quite sure what their situation is going to be. What do you know about yours, and how much can you tell us through that?
I've been on and off the gas. I've been shutting it off this whole caution, all the way down the backstretch, getting the pace car. It's close. I don't know right now exactly how much we're going to lose once I go full throttle, but it's definitely going to be close, give or take maybe a lap or two. I'm really glad this caution came out, so it gives us a little bit more breathing room.
It'll be close, I think, for everybody, and you're definitely not the only one. But we'll let you get back to it now, Sean. So thanks for taking the time to talk to all of us up here in the booth, and we wish you best of luck over these last 20 or so laps.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hope you guys enjoy it. Last few laps. Good show.
Figure we'll be looking forward to it, Mr. Macklin, as we, I think, get ready to get everything set up here. I'd be surprised if we don't see lights off on the pace car this time around.
We should see lights off on the pace car, and I believe I was crunching a few more numbers, and yeah, Sean is still saving gas, as well as pretty much everybody else up here in the field, but I believe this caution is going to keep everybody pretty much safe to the end, to not have to worry about fuel. They were about 2 laps outside of the window by my calculation before this caution came out, and with having I believe 4 laps of pacing right now, that's going to give them enough fuel to make it back. They may not have enough fuel to go do a burnout, whoever ends up getting the victory, but they should be able to make it to the checkered flag pretty safely.
It'll be tight, it'll be close. But I think you're right. I think we will have at least a few, especially some of the ones who came down and got a little bit of extra fuel. I think Lionel Callisto is the main one that I have a feeling is probably the most safe in all of this. So we'll go ahead and reset your top 10 though for this restart, which will come on lap 65. So 21 laps to go when they hit the stripe. Sean Boundy, David Comstock, Shane Ewing, Austin Coop, Nick Silver, your top 5 in that order. Then you have Gabe Wood in 6th, Doug Roth 7th, Carl Shedd 8th, Dylan Jones 9th, who's already won, doesn't need to win this week, and then David Washington rounding out your top 10 at the moment. But we know, I think, as well as anywhere, and especially at this kind of place, that all of this is subject to change.
Yeah, and inside 20 laps to go, it's about to get very chaotic. When they get back to the stripe, it'll actually be 20 laps to go for these drivers. and I expect the aggression levels to just keep rising. We saw what happened right there to bring out this caution. Tanner Tallarico, Anthony DeBarro were racing very hard trying to make something happen, and unfortunately they just came together, and it did collect one of our playoff contenders in Brandon Bowie, who currently is sitting back in the 19th position, 1 lap down. He's on pit road right now trying to get some damage fixed, and if he can stay out there and catch another big wreck, that could be a lifesaver for him in this battle to make it into the round of 8 as they try to advance into the next round here. But we got to focus on the restart coming up as Sean Boundy and David Comstock are getting ready to lead them to the green.
We'll hold, we'll pause, we'll see how long Boundy waits to make it happen. He'll go middle of the tri-oval, gets a decent jump here. So we get the green flag once more. Comstock immediately jumps down to the bottom and gets the hole in there, and then you've got the Lodestar guys. You've got Shane Ewing right there. He's got a little bit of help from Nick Silver in the 24, and then Austin Coop up there in the top 5 as well. Everybody getting down to the bottom pretty quickly, though.
Yeah, single file through much of the top 10. Nelson Rivera is the only car on the outside line right now, and as everybody works to get up to speed, it takes almost a full lap to get these cars wound up to 200 miles an hour, and everybody's just trying to get their car to that point now, and this becomes the question of when do you make the move. If you make the move too soon and nobody goes with you, you're going to fall all the way back, at least right now, to about the 15th position. So you've got to be very careful to make that move at the right time, and you've got to know you have somebody going with you when you decide to make that move. If you're David Comstock, it's a very treacherous spot. You don't want to make that move too soon. You want to hope you have Shane Ewing going with you, and if you're one of these guys at the back of the pack, you've got to know that you've got some friends back there as well. So the next 20 laps are going to be very interesting to see it with these guys and what they decide to do.
And it makes me wonder, we talked a lot about teammates tonight already, and I think it's interesting to kind of look at the pairings once more. Sean Boundy and Nick Silver right up there at the top, representing Prestige Worldwide. Then you've got the Turn 1 heroes, Austin Coop, David Comstock are running up towards the front of this thing. You've got Shane Ewing holding it down at the moment for Lodestar Racing as well. So a decent mix of folks in all of this, but I think interestingly enough, not really much of a presence from Aegis Motorsports. They're all sitting toward the back of this, and one car goes around spinning in the middle of the racetrack on the front straightaway. It's Chris Hurlow to bring out the caution on lap 67, and it looked like he got help, and the help came from the number 20 machine of A.J. Browning.
I'm not really sure what happened right there. I'm trying to watch it, and it just looks like a bump draft gone wrong, but not really sure why they were bump drafting at that point of the track. There was really nowhere to go, and they weren't on the outside line. They were single file on the bottom, so unfortunate break for Chris Hurlow, and it looks like that's going to bring at least a slow end to his night as he has brought the car back to pit road, and I don't believe we're going to see him back out there. But this bunches everybody back up, James, and now when we go back green, it's going to be less than 15 laps to go. Do these guys get single file once again, or are they going to take their chances and go after it?
At what point do you go after it and try and figure out things? I think that's the real question, because for some of these drivers, and I just looked through the list here trying to find some of the playoff drivers, but your Comstocks, your Silvers, your Sheds, your Washingtons and company, Rapaload too. You've already got a decent points night set up at the moment, since the only cars running on track, I think, are the top 18. Everybody from 19th down through to 28th is already out, so you're definitely gaining a few points on some of the drivers in this field. But you could obviously gain more, and I guess at that stage, then it just becomes about trying to balance the risk and reward that's inherent with all of this.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting, and like you mentioned, with these guys, some of them already having a really good points night set up if they can finish where they're at. Do you want to take that chance on going for the win and then potentially getting yourself caught up in a wreck? It's going to be very interesting to see what decision these guys make. For some of these guys towards the back half of this thing, you got to believe maybe they want to go after it. Nick Silver, he's made up a ton of points tonight with all the guys that have had issues, but a win guarantees that he can go into Kansas next week and not even have to worry about it. Same thing for David Comstock. The only guy that's up here that is completely stress-free, James, is Dylan Jones, because he won last week at Charlotte, and he has absolutely nothing to worry about in these last 15 laps.
So he gets to breathe easy, and while he breathes easy, we'll take a breather and take a short break here on our coverage of the RealSimRacing.com Full Throttle Cup Series presented by Gary Mercer Trucking, live from Talladega. You're watching LSR TV, your home for sim racing.
The Cars Tour crowns champions at South Boston Speedway on Saturday, October 14th.
Welcome back to LSRTV's coverage of the RealSimRacing.com Full Throttle Cup Series, presented by Gary Mercer Trucking here at the Talladega Superspeedway. Getting ready for the next restart in this race, which will come on lap 71 of 85. Sean Boundy, your race leader. David Comstock, Shane Ewing, Nick Silver, Austin Coop, your top 5. Gabe Wood, Doug Roth, Carl Shedd, David Washington, and Dylan Jones, your top 10. Macklin, we've seen the intensity go up little by little over the last 15 to 20 laps. Do you have any idea how it's going to shape up for this final run to the checkers, in which we have 15 laps left?
I have only 2 words: utter chaos. That's what the next 15 laps are going to be for these guys. It's going to be wild. They're going to start getting more aggressive. The outside line, while it hasn't really been a factor here tonight, it's going to have to be a factor if you want to get up there and challenge Sean Boundy for the race win. If you just stay around on the bottom, you can't go anywhere. You're not going to be able to win the race that way. And for several of these drivers, they have nothing to lose. There's drivers up in this field that are not running for the championship. They're not in the playoffs. You've got Austin Coop up there looking for his first win. You've got Gabe Wood up there looking for his first win. Doug Roth looking to become the first 2-time winner, and then you've got a handful of other drivers at the back of the pack that would like to make something happen too. They're going to get it mixed up, and they're going to start getting more aggressive. It's just a matter of when they make that move.
When? That's the question. So many different answers, but only one of them is the correct answer, and we'll see who has the right answer here not too long from now. Boundy gets control of the restart again. Base car off on pit road. 34 rolls up to the restart zone and goes earlier than normal this time. And I think most everybody read that pretty well. David Comstock definitely read it well. He's going to come to the outside of Boundy without any hesitation. And while Ewing is going to push the 34, it may well be Comstock, if he gets the right amount of help from Nick Silver, that goes to the front of this.
Everybody's already fighting to get to the bottom, as Gabe Wood went to the bottom almost immediately behind Austin Coop, and now it's just David Comstock and Nick Silver on the outside line. There is some help coming a little bit further back. Carl Shedd is up there trying to make something happen, and I believe that's his teammate Dylan Jones right behind him as well. These guys are trying to get closer to the front, but they're just not close enough, and now Nick Silver goes to the bottom, and that's going to leave Comstock out on the outside by himself, and he's not going to be able to get to the bottom. So now how far back does he fall?
Sliding back ever so slightly. He tries to get help on the outside, though. Austin Coop was going to jump up there and thought about it, and then everybody decided to jump up there, and Comstock got back in line. That was interesting. So now Comstock, who was on the outside just a moment ago, sitting there on the inside, but he may slide and hold the middle, I guess, is what it looks like he's trying to do, because he can see you've got Doug Roth, who's won here at Talladega before, with help from Carl Shedd and Dylan Jones on the top side, and they're really starting to make things happen.
And while all that is happening, we have a penalty coming from the restart. Our race leader, Sean Boundy, was tagged for not maintaining pace speed on the restart. He slowed down coming to the restart box, and unfortunately for him, that's going to result in a stop-and-go penalty. So for Sean Boundy, you see him now coming to pit road. He's going to have to make a stop-and-go, and he will not be in contention for this thing. If he can get a caution, he'd be able to get back into the draft, but as of right now, he has lost contention to go for the win, and that's going to hand the lead to one of our playoff contenders, Shane Ewing. He's the race leader now, and he came into this thing in 11th place in the playoff grid, but as they run right now, he'd be guaranteed a spot into the round of 8.
What a story that would be. The last man to qualify at Dover, who had to race to the very, very end to make the round of 12 for the round of 16. If he could win his way into the round of 8, how crazy would that be? That being said, he just got leapfrogged because Nick Silver threw Austin Coop to the front of this thing, and Coop just sat there on the front end and left Nick Silver out to dry.
And unfortunately for Nick Silver, everybody's back to the bottom of the racetrack, so unless he can get a couple of guys up there to help him, he's going to fall backwards, and right now that indeed is the case for the number 24 machine as he's dropping back, and here comes Doug Roth up into the picture. He's all the way up to the 4th position, and he is trying to emerge into this thing and be a little bit of a spoiler, just like Austin Coop, who is the leader right now, just trying to hang on, see if he can't do this thing for 10 more circuits, 10 and a half more circuits, to see if he can hang on and get his first Full Throttle Cup Series victory here on Monday nights. He's got a very fast car, and I love the pink on that car. He's supporting the breast cancer awareness people very well with that car.
Breast cancer awareness pacing the way here at Talladega, coming to get 10 to go this time by, and here comes the 32 machine. Shane Ewing goes to the top, and they all went to the top side at that point. Everybody just decided to jump up there, so he goes right up there, and he'll go and maybe try and get the race lead from Coop. Not quite, though. Here comes the 53 back on the bottom with help from his teammate from Turn 1 Heroes, David Comstock. The 53 and the 42 fighting back on the inside, but do they have the help behind them to keep it going?
It's not going to be easy for these guys. It's basically just the two of them right now as they have gapped themselves from Doug Roth on that 43, and Shane Ewing will take the race lead away from Austin Coop, and immediately he goes to the bottom of the racetrack and leaves Nick Silver out there. He does have some help. He's got Carl Shedd and Dylan Jones behind him, but he already lost momentum from that move, and now he's going to have to try to gather it back up and see if he can't get closer to the front. Now Austin Coop all over the back bumper of Shane Ewing, trying to push himself clear to see if he can't jump up in front of Nick Silver. He's not able to do it right now. He's going to have to stay on the back bumper of the number 32 machine.
Help coming. Maybe, in the form of David Washington on that bottom side, but nothing yet. And I think, to their credit, these three on the top side have managed to keep it going, and they've stayed much more tucked up together than most of these drivers. And now they're starting to slide back a little bit as the numbers game kind of goes against them, but still a pretty impressive little drafting run right there over the last lap.
Yeah, they were doing a very good job on the outside line, and were able to maintain that and stay close to these guys. And now as we get closer to the end of this thing, they're just trying to shuffle around and see if they can't make something happen. David Comstock, Austin Coop both go to the outside line. That's going to leave Shane Ewing pretty much by himself on the bottom. He tries to pull up the block, but he's not going to be able to do it. And now Austin Coop gets a great run off the corner, and he's going to get clear of Shane Ewing. Now the question is, can he get his teammate clear as well? And it looks like as they head to turn 3, that might indeed be the case as they come down to the corner. Actually, Comstock's going to get left out there, and Coop goes back to the lead, and he goes immediately to the bottom of the racetrack.
Coop goes to the bottom, and Comstock immediately decided to side draft the 32 of Shane Ewing. And Coop, I think, is just maybe going to ride the brakes a little bit and try and drag Comstock back up to the front of this. I don't know how successful he'll be in trying to do that, but Comstock there kind of hanging up top, waiting for help from Nick Silver, and Ewing now there all alone, at least within that sort of grouping. He could jump up top if he wanted to try and clear Austin Coop if he wanted.
If he wanted is the key, and right now it's all about timing. We're getting to that point of the race where you have to time this thing happening at the perfect moment. You have to make sure that you don't make that move too soon. Did Austin Coop get to the lead too soon? That's a big question right now, is now they're single file once again. David Comstock was able to slide his way back to the bottom in 4th. And how about Doug Roth in that number 43 machine? He's up there, and he has an opportunity to do something that nobody else in this field could do here tonight, and that is get his second victory here at Talladega Superspeedway and be the only multi-time winner here at Talladega in the Full Throttle Cup Series.
A feat in and of itself, as far as I'm concerned, if he can manage to pull that off. But for the moment, they're all single file, and that's bad news for anybody from about 5th, 6th, 7th on back as you look at this, because now you're not going to have any way to race your way towards the front of this field. You've got to find a way to get to the outside and get some help to get up to the front if you're back there. But it's not coming at the moment because they're all running single file on the bottom.
And if you're Austin Coop, that's exactly what you want to see. Everybody's single file around the bottom of the racetrack. The problem is he's got 3 playoff contenders lined up right on his back bumper, and they all know what a victory here at Talladega means. It means they get to go to Kansas next week stress-free, worry-free. They can go in there and they can finish dead last, but they're still going to move on to the round of 8. So very hungry drivers right behind Austin Coop. Of course, he's hungry too. He's never won in the Full Throttle Cup Series. He'd love to get his first victory here tonight, but he's got to be mindful of the guys that are right behind him. They're not going to give this thing to him at all. They're going to take every chance they can. And now here goes Shane Ewing to the outside. Just as I say that, he's going to try to take the lead away in turn 3.
Ewing to the outside with help from Comstock. Washington now to the bottom to help Austin Coop. Side drafting everywhere. It was maybe a foot, if that, in between the 32 and the 53 and the 98 and the 42. Coming out of turn 4, absolutely nothing to give at the line. Coop will get it by a nose, but it's close. It's really, really close.
And as they work through turns 1 and 2, Shane Ewing trying to carry that momentum, but now the numbers game starting to go against him as it's just him, Comstock, and Doug Roth trying to tag along on the outside line. And now Coop has an issue off turn 2, and he goes way down to the bottom of the racetrack, almost makes contact with the inside wall. He's going to try to merge back up into the field, but he will lose the race lead. I don't believe he's going to fall out of the draft, though, so he still has an opportunity, but a huge moment for our race leader coming off the corner. Could have been much worse than it was, and now he has to gather it back up and see if he can't get back up there.
I really don't know how he saved it. He should have been a complete and total goner. And David Washington just got to the race lead and has got help from a PowerTech driver in Carl Shed and his teammate Dylan Jones. And we haven't talked about Aegis at all up until this point tonight, but now here we are, and we've got 3 laps to go, and guess what? They're finally back in the front of the field like they've been for so much of this season so far.
And it's amazing how the cream rises to the top. These guys, these 3 guys in particular, were running well outside of this field, or outside of the front of the field for the majority of this race. At one point, David Washington, Carl Shed, and with the exception of Dylan Jones, I'm sorry, Dylan Jones ran up front pretty much all night long. But David Washington, Carl Shed, they ran at the back. They were outside of the top 20 at one point. And now, with 2 laps to go, they're leading this race and they have an opportunity to win.
David Washington trying to lock his way into the round of 8 with a victory. They're going helter-skelter behind him, trying to get organized and find a way to get around these 3 Aegis drivers, but it's going to take a committed move, I think, on everybody's part. You're going to have all, 5 of those cars, 6 of those cars? I can't quite tell. I think it might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think they're all going to have to get lined up if they want to find a way around the Aegis drivers. That is how strong the Aegis and PowerTech collective has been this year.
Well, not only that, but we've seen time and time again that these Aegis PowerTech guys, they're going to stick together. They will not break apart in this final lap. More than likely, they're going to stay single file on the bottom. If they're going to make a move, and as soon as I say that, here goes Dylan Jones to the outside, so never mind. And how about Doug Roth? He's still in the mix. He could get his second win at Talladega. White flag here at Talladega.
Still David Washington at this point. He's got help from Carl Shed behind him, side by side behind those 2. Doug Roth, Dylan Jones on the top side, then Coop and Comstock in the next row. Then Silver, then contact. They wreck on the back straightaway. Contact between 3 or 4 different drivers, and that should hand this race to David Washington. If we don't get a yellow here, we'll wait and see what happens as they continue wrecking down the back straightaway. But it's Washington, Shed, and Doug Roth now with a shot to make it happen coming out of turn 4. Roth might get a run. He'll jump to the outside, shade to the inside. Can he do anything about it? Washington will sit on the bottom of the racetrack, and I think he should be okay. Yes, David Washington gets the win at Talladega. And for a man who has gone on record and said he doesn't like plate racing all that much, he's been trying to find a plate win for a while now. And one of the most successful drivers in the history of this series has finally got a win at a restrictor plate racetrack.
And we felt like the number 98 machine was going to be safe to advance to the round of 8, but now we know for sure David Washington will be competing in the round of 8 and have an opportunity to go to the round of 4 at Homestead, the championship round, after a very impressive victory. He rode around at the back of this field pretty much until about 20 laps ago, and then all of a sudden he was in the middle of this thing, and when the seas parted, he was able to go to the lead and got another victory here on Monday night.
Meanwhile, as I take a look at the replay of the wreck that happened on the last lap, Austin Coop definitely slid up into Dylan Jones. That's officially what started it, but I'm not convinced that there wasn't a little bit of netcode involved, because there was definitely a gap between those two cars on screen. So I'm not convinced that that was anything intentional from Coop. I think it was just a little bit of internet error more than anything else. But it got a good amount of guys. David Comstock got caught up in it. Nick Silver got caught up in it. Dylan Jones got caught up in it and got pile driven by, I want to say that might have been Ross Cato as I look at this. I think it was Ross Cato in 12 who just had nowhere to go, tried to avoid it, and just couldn't get out of the way in time. And then just looking back for this, we know Coop was involved. We know Comstock was involved. I think, maybe of note, Lionel Kalisto was able to come through and get 6th out of all of that, and he wasn't even in that pack of cars. He was just sitting behind all of it, and he and Sean Boundy, and I believe, well, Cato was part of that group behind them. So, but Boundy and Kalisto were able to come through and both finish off this race very, very nicely.
Yeah, very impressive drives for both of those drivers, and for some of your guys that had some issues here tonight, this is going to be a very tall order going into Kansas next week, and I feel like Daniel Eberhardt, he's going to be in a little bit of a situation, but I think he might still be okay. He finished 20th here tonight. He came in the 4th position in the playoffs, but a lot of the guys that were on the outside looking in, coming into tonight, they got really solid finishes here tonight. Lionel Kalisto, as you mentioned, finished 6th. Shane Ewing was able to finish 7th. How about Nick Silver getting a good run? He finishes 9th. And then, of course, you have Carl Shedd up there that finishes in 3rd. So several of these guys got away with a pretty good run and could potentially shake these points up.
A lot of point shakeups, a lot of math that needs to be done, and we'll figure it out here in this commercial break that we'll take right now before we go back to the leaderboard and talk to your top 3 finishers. You're watching coverage of the RealSimRacing.com Full Throttle Cup Series, presented by Gary Mercer Trucking on LSRTV, your home for sim racing.
When I sat in the car, you always wonder, what's it going to feel like? It was my first time driving a mid-engine GT car. My thoughts were, wow, this is really good for our first time in a car. I was really surprised by it. You're sitting low, you got the A-pillars at steep angles, the windshields at steep angles, you can see the fender flares. I think we have a chance to win. Everything's got to go right, but I think we have a car that can win the race or be on the podium. But can you imagine how cool that would be to go back 50 years later to the year and do it?
Welcome back to coverage of the RealSimRacing.com Full Throttle Cup Series, presented by Gary Mercer Trucking here on LSRTV, where we have wrapped up the 30th race of the 2017 season from Talladega, the final restrictor plate race of the season. David Washington has come out on top of things. It's time to bring you tonight's full field rundown, which begins with Washington, who collects another victory, but his first on a restrictor plate track, the last type of track that he hadn't won at until tonight. Doug Roth, former Talladega winner, comes home second this evening. Carl Shedd finished in the third position. Eric Stanford was fourth at the end of the night. David Comstock was part of that big melee at the end of the race, finished fifth. Lionel Callisto was sixth. Shane Ewing seventh in the final field rundown. Trevor Ravelo was eighth. Nick Silver ninth, and Austin Coop 10th.
11th will go to Tanner Tallarico. Then we have Bruce Pearson finishing in 12th, and then 13th and the final car to finish on the lead lap here tonight. Dylan Jones will come home in 13th. Of course, as we already mentioned, he won last week at Charlotte, so he has no worries about where he finished here tonight or where he finishes next week at Kansas. Ross Cato will finish in the 14th position. Gabe Wood will finish 15th. Sean Boundy comes home 16th. Then we have Brandon Bowie coming home 17th. He was 7 laps down, just trying to nurse this thing home to make sure he scored some points before this thing was all said and done. AJ Browning comes home in the 18th position. Chris Hurlow finishes 19th, and then Daniel Eberhardt, also just trying to get a home and score some points, he finishes in the 20th spot.
21st belonged to Anthony DeBarro. 22nd was Sean Casto. Most of these drivers out of the race early after incidents and troubles and a lot of damage and a lot of torn sheet metal. Andrew Farina is the winner in April, could not back it up, got caught up in the earliest of the late race wrecks and managed to finish 23rd after coming back out on track a little bit to claim a few laps. Next up on the list is Nelson Rivera, who finished 24th. Dwayne Vincent with a tough night, needed a good finish here after missing the race last week, only could finish 25th. Corey Rolfe was 26th. Dakota Bowman 27th, and Douglas Wyatt 28th in your final field rundown. So, there is your list of 28 and where they finished. And now we head to Victory Lane with one David Washington. And Dave, we mentioned it here a little bit on the broadcast. You've been fighting for a win on the plate tracks for forever because you've won at the road courses, you've won at the mile and a half, you've won at the short tracks. You haven't had one at a place like this until now. So even though it's, a regular race in a sense, I have to believe that this one means a little bit more than some of the other ones that you've won because of how hard it's been to get one at a place like this.
Yeah, this is my bucket list track. This was the last one to conquer. Every league, every official race, practice, it didn't matter where I was at. I could be there at the end, finish second a bunch of times, but never be in the spot to actually get a win. I was super excited when I still don't know what happened with Q, but we were just pretty much trying to push him to the finish and finish it the way we were. There was really no strategy at the end to try to jumble up spots or anything. But yeah, this one here means a lot to me.
6 wins on the season now for you, more than anybody else in this series. The first since we were at Bristol about a month and change ago. And it's been a little bit spotty in between then, but now you've got 3 top 5s in your last 4 races, which I think as we start getting towards Homestead, knowing that you wanted to be one of those 4, you've been there before, you want to be the guy that races for the title on Homestead, to have everything turning this way at the right time definitely has got to be good for you in this 98 team.
Oh yeah, definitely. We kind of slowed the pace down a little bit. Not try to fight so much for the wins, but finish in the top 5 or 3 if we can. Not really play it safe, but play it safe enough that we finish. We've been really clicking here the last couple races, and mishaps here or there. Some to do on my part, and some to do on the other circumstances. But overall this season, it hasn't been the strongest. I mean, we didn't come on like a firestorm at the end like we wanted to, but we're here. We're still in the back of everybody's mind, and we'll take it to Homestead.
And how big was the teamwork tonight? We didn't see much of Aegis at the front of this field at all, and that was definitely intentional to keep yourselves out of trouble. But surprise, surprise, we get down to the end of it, and we have a handful of laps to go, and it's you and Carl and Dylan all right there helping each other run at the front of this thing.
Now, we pretty much played the reverse role tonight. Instead of us all ganging up at, to take over the second part of the race, everybody pretty much did their own thing tonight. We wanted to see how it would play out. And lo and behold, it played out to my surprise that everybody was there at the end. There was a couple of us working together. Some guys were working with other guys. It was different tonight. There really wasn't stress. It was just fun. I had a lot of fun tonight.
You had fun. You get Kansas next week, but you can really start looking towards Martinsville, Texas, Phoenix in the round of 8. You have a favorite amongst those 3 places that you really, really would like to go get that next one at?
I think Texas. That'd be the one I'd really want to get.
Any particular reason why?
I haven't got that one yet either. That one there, I had a fast car the last time we were there. Just couldn't do anything at the end. And I'm hoping being more prepared this time going into that race that we'll at least be there at the end to give it a shot. But again, you never know. We'll just have to wait, get through the first part of the the run and see where we're at, and what we have to do as far as if we get green flag pit stops and strategy goes, and just work on it from there.
In the meantime, I know there are a lot of people that help you and help this operation be so successful. So who do you need to thank for making this run possible?
Yeah, definitely big shout out to Andy tonight. He had his hands full with everybody between checking replays and watching guys throughout the whole race. He was busy. Carl and Jones at the end. Eric Stanford, Daniel Eberhardt, Ross Cato. This is a whole list of them that put into practice each and every week. Julio for putting us together. Give a shout out to my mom that watches each week. You guys for broadcasting this thing, and LSRTV for having this league. We're having a lot of fun.
Thanks for the time, David. Congrats on the victory, and we'll see you next week in Kansas.
Thanks, guys.
So there's David Washington, winner for the 6th time in 2017, and finally a winner at a plate track. And from him, we turn to Brian Macklin, who gets to talk to, for the first time this season, if I'm not mistaken, the number 43 machine of Doug Roth.
Yeah, I'm down here on pit road with Doug. Doug, you finished second here tonight. You had an opportunity to become the first guy to win 2 races at Talladega Superspeedway here in the Full Throttle Cup Series. Take us through your night and how close you came to getting that second victory here at Talladega.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. It was a great night for my car on the Hippies Paint Shop Motorsports team, but it started out a little rough. We were actually involved in the earlier incident that didn't bring out a caution, but there's a lot of cars that were spinning and got dented up, and unfortunately 43 STP got into that mess a little bit and wrinkled up the front end, so we were kind of down on power from that point forward. So to work our way up, we just kind of took our time, tried to make moves where we could make moves, and it wasn't damaged enough to keep us out of the top 5 and contend for the lead and the win. But at the end of the day, we just didn't have anything for David. I mean, he had such a strong car, and I'm not sure about his damage, but I knew that he had us by mile per hour or so. But overall, good run for us tonight for sure.
And you obviously haven't had the season you were hoping for. This is just your first top 5 on the season. Does this build some momentum for you guys? Obviously, we still have a handful of races left in the 2017 campaign, but does this begin to build some momentum for next season and possibly what could be for the number 43 machine in 2018?
I think so. You're definitely right. It wasn't the season we were hoping for. We've been a lot higher. Matter of fact, we were in the chase, I think, last year with our win here at Talladega, and I like Talladega. I like the super speedway tracks. But the talent in the league is just it's just gets better and better each year, and I have more starts than pretty much anybody in RSR for Full Throttle Cup, and each year the competition gets harder and stiffer, and makes it harder harder and harder on others to excel when the competition's so high. But yeah, it definitely gives us some confidence. We still got a couple races to go this season, even though we're not contending for a championship. We're still looking for the best finishes we can get, and hopefully get some wins. And next season, we'll turn it all around and see what we can do.
If you had to pick out of the next 5 races, Kansas, Martinsville, Texas, Phoenix, or Homestead, which track do you think you stand the best chance at going out there and stealing a victory?
By far for me, it would be Martinsville. I like super speedways, and then I like the short tracks. I tend to do well at Martinsville. Short, flatter tracks I do well at. The mile and a halves, I'm average at best. But the short tracks and the super speedways, I tend to excel. And I know a lot of it's based on luck, and it is. But I do feel like there is some skill to those tracks, and I think that's a testament to my good finishes that I typically get here in Daytona and some of the short tracks. But we'll see. But yeah, hopefully we kind of have Martinsville circled on the calendar for another good finish.
And you sound like my kind of guy. Martinsville is my favorite track that we run on the service. I can't wait to get to call that race here in a couple of weeks. It should be very exciting. But before we let you go, Doug, I just need to give you a chance to say thank you to your sponsors and say hi to any friends or family. I know you're going to thank Hippie's Paint Shop. I know that's one of them. But who else makes it happen for you on the number 43 machine?
Absolutely. I'd like to thank, first and foremost, my family. My mom, she watches me every week. And unfortunately, I don't finish too well every week. So, Mom, thanks for being my biggest fan, and appreciate your support. Like you said, Hippie's Paint Shop, because at Hippie's Paint Shop, the cost isn't high, just the painter. My teammates, Hippie, Wyatt, Dwayne, I hate it for him. He got busted for a pit stall violation, and it ruined his night and his chances. And Corey Wolf, who's also on the team. So we have a great team. We stick together, and although as a team, we haven't done all that well, as good as we hoped, we're still looking at progressing, in a strong fashion moving forward.
All right,
And I also like to thank you guys too in LSRTV. You guys do an awesome job. You guys always have. You guys continue, guys. The quality of your broadcasts are second to none by far.
Well, thank you for that, Doug, and congrats on your runner-up finish here tonight, and good luck through the rest of the season.
Thanks, Brian. I appreciate it. Take care.
And that was Doug Roth. He finishes second here tonight, just one position shy of getting his second victory here at the Talladega Superspeedway. Now, James, I believe you have emerged from victory lane, and you've caught up with our third-place finisher, another one of the playoff contenders. He's Carl Shedden. He finished third here tonight.
Carl Shed, a big night in the points, I think, would be almost a massive understatement when you consider how many drivers were in incidents and wrecks and came away with torn-up race cars tonight, but you were one of the very few that kept a clean race car the majority of the night. So was there any sort of secret in how you managed to pull that off, or was that just a little bit of luck?
Man, I feel like it's always luck if you can survive one of these tracks. It's like when the chase starts, you look at that list of tracks, you start trying to eliminate risks in your mind and think of the places you might need to get a head start, and you just look at a track like Talladega, and it kind of reminds me of those little Mario boxes with the question mark on it. You never know what you're going to draw. So frankly, I'd love to say it was skill, but I felt like it was just being fortunate enough to have good teammates and be in the right place at the right time.
And you look at a lot of the guys that you beat out here on points, and the way you jumped up in the standings, you're now 13 points north of the cutoff line, which is pretty significant when we consider how many other drivers got caught up in things. To have that sort of buffer going into Kansas, how big is that for you, and how big is that for your teammates who know that they can help you now to get into the round of 8?
Yeah, it's fantastic. anytime you leave Talladega in a better position than you got there, it raises your confidence. Kansas is a track that's usually good for me, if not decent. So, we look forward to maybe going there and trying to keep in that top 10. If we do that and one of these guys on the edge doesn't end up catching a win, we should be in a good spot. I mean, anything can happen. People can find, your left or right rear with their fender anytime, and that can change things. But I think if we can just go there and run the kind of race we had and get a good series of green flag runs, so we can run out some, wear some tires out and count on people making mistakes on pit road, we'll be in good shape.
So you'll look forward to Kansas, but before you head off to the plains there in the middle of the country, there are a lot of people that make it happen for you and make it possible. So who do you need to thank for getting this 45 car on the podium tonight?
Man, all my teammates at Aegis and PowerTech, we have a good time ripping on each other and providing support to one another. And it means a lot to run with a group of good guys that have each other's best interests in mind. So obviously a big thanks to all of those guys, David, Dylan, Daniel, Andrew, Trevor, Ross, and I'm probably missing somebody. We got our sponsors, Aegis, of course, Julio, who I hope he's watching, hope he's enjoying this. I'm sure he's got his Dave Washington foam finger out. And he's rocking that right now, so that's good to see. And PowerTech, James Ross, spotted for me last week, was our spotter last season. So, and then of course I mentioned our Aegis team, but we've got kind of our team coach, I'd almost say, but the guy's keeping the information up there for us, Andy, keeping the paint schemes looking sexy for everybody every week. That's a lot of work. And I don't know how he finds the time to do it. So he keeps our cars looking pretty and gives us all the information. So Andy Kessler, of course, and then Eric Stanford as a teammate. I missed there. He's joined us the last 6 weeks, I believe, and it's been good having him around. And of course, you guys up there in the booth. It's always a fun thing on Tuesdays to listen to the broadcast and see what I missed.
Well, always fun to watch you race on the track, Carl, and we'll look forward to seeing you go after the victory next week in Kansas.
10-4, fellas. We'll see you there. Thank you.
There's Carl Shedd. Third place tonight, and with that, we can look past Talladega and get out of Alabama and move our way on to Kansas. So I guess we're jumping from one great band of the 70s to another great band of the 70s in some sense, right, Brian?
Absolutely. What a wild night we had here, though, James. I just can't get over how intense this race was. And you asked at the beginning of this race if we were going to have more or less cars left at the end of this thing than in the Cup Series yesterday afternoon. It looks like we managed to beat them by just a handful of cars. I think we had 16 still running at the completion of this thing, maybe 17. So we beat them by about 3 cars. We did a good job.
Well, save for the few that wrecked, I suppose, on that last lap. But still, we're done with Talladega. We'll go back to Kansas and repeat the Talladega, Kansas swoop that we did in May, but now in October, and with places in the playoffs on the line, because we conclude the round of 12 there, and we will eliminate 4 drivers and go to the round of 8 from that point on. And before we do, here's your points cutoff as it stands going into next week's race at Kansas. You have David Washington and Dylan Jones both into the round of 8 already on victories, so just my little mishap at the very beginning of the race ended up being true at the end. Maybe I was a little bit prophetic. How funny. But Carl Shedd sits behind David Comstock. Comstock leads everybody on points, 23 to the good of the cutoff line. And then you've got Carl Shedd, who is 13 clear. Daniel Everhart is 15 clear. Trevor Roppolo, 10 clear. Nick Silver, 2 clear. And then the cut line, Andrew Friedar is on 3,058 points. He's the last man in after his big struggles. Lionel Calixto, 2 points back. Brandon Bowie, 3. Shane Ewing, 8. And Dwayne Vincent, 28 points back of Friedar. So he's in a must-win spot. He'll be the one, I think, driving the pressure more than anything else and more than anybody else next week at the 1.5 miles outside of Kansas City.
Kansas is absolutely going to be a very interesting race, but for two drivers, they don't have to worry about it. Dylan Jones, David Washington, they get to go in there. They can try to steal another victory, or they can just sit back and watch all the chaos happen around them. It's going to be very interesting. I believe you have a couple of drivers that are fairly safe. However, if they get caught up in something, they could still find themselves on the outside looking in, and that is especially true for guys like Trevor Roppolo, Daniel Eberhardt, Carl Shedd, and even David Comstock. Comstock's got a 23-point advantage, but if he gets wrecked early and can't get back out there, that could be what takes him out of this thing as well. So all these guys have to be very careful when they get to Kansas next week.
Until then, and until we make it to the Sunflower State, we'll go ahead and sign off for tonight from Talladega. This will conclude this Monday night's coverage of the RealSimRacing.com Full Throttle Cup Series presented by Gary Mercer Trucking on your home for sim racing, LSRTV. For my colleague up here in the booth, Brian Macklin, for our lovely and talented producer, Cisco Scaramuzza, Kyle Barnes, and Doug Atkinson at Real Sim Racing, and for Laura Lawson, DJ Lyon, and Evan Pasoko at LSRTV, I'm James Pike saying thank you for watching tonight's broadcast, and we will see you all next Monday night from Kansas.